Today's episode is brought to you by Squarespace. And welcome back to another episode of bullshit-free, dairy-free reading advice, and let's just jump straight into it without too much storytelling. So, in the vast history of the humanities, of philosophy, of literature, of history, there are many books that are considered as door stoppers, or a brick, or something that you would hit someone with. So, you want to be the kind of person to get through these kind of books, huh? You have the integrity enough to actually read the books instead of just talking about them, huh? Why do I feel like I'm doing an infomercial? Then do I have the solution for you? This is really turning to an infomercial now. All jokes aside, recently I've been reading a lot of this Being and Time stuff by Martin Heidegger because I just kind of realized if I want to understand 20th century philosophy or continental philosophy in general or phenomenology in general, there are certain works that you simply cannot ignore if you want a foundation understanding of whatever field you're into. To shun the responsibility of eventually getting to some of these books, it's kind of like saying, well, I'm content with a partial understanding of this field and I'm never ever going to bite the bullet on this one. But assuming you have the courage enough to dig through some of these books, well, do I have a hack and a trick for you. So here are the instructions for this reading hack for you to summon up the courage to get through some of these long and complicated books. And it might help you, it might not help you, just keep it with you, keep the tip with you, try it out, and get angry at me in the comment section down below if it doesn't work for you. Step number 1, put an audiobook on, yes I said audiobook, at 1.5 speed and read along this long and complicated work that you have while you are playing the audio in your ear. And before you start reading, make sure to put a little bracket next to the paragraph where you've started your recording, or started the audiobook playback. This is going to make it easier for you to track where you are in the book, and this is going to make it very easy for your reading progress to sync up with your listening progress. And the second step is if you see anything important or a very important concept highlighted, pause the recording, but don't dwell on that highlight for way too long and just keep listening and keep reading. I'm going to give you the reasons for these instructions later in the second part of this video, but for now, let me just get through all the instructions first. And number 3, stop the recording once you've read enough and put another little bracket at the place where you've ended your reading. And again, this is going to make it very easy for you to track your reading so you know exactly where you've started and where you've ended. And after you read through a certain amount, review all of your highlights and review the things you've highlighted. In a previous video on analytical reading, I called this act of highlighting signposting. So if you want to learn how to read analytically, check out that video. It's going to pop up on the screen right about now. And here I hear a lot of angry comments coming in, a lot of stuff, objections and questions and stuff. Stuff like, Robin, what do you mean listening to an audiobook while reading the book at the same time? Wouldn't that just jumble up all of my senses? And also, what do you mean putting it on 1.5 speed? Like, are you insane? Like I said, we're gonna answer all of the questions here in the justification section of this video. Justification 1, why audiobooks? Now, when I first got into audiobooks, I've always treated it as a bit of a cop-out, or at least something to entertain myself with. But I think it's that part of my brain that still lives in the 20th century. I'm just kind of like, ooh, audiobooks, alien technology, I don't want to touch that. But after I've really embraced this idea of reading a book with an audiobook in the background, I discovered something about myself that I wasn't aware of before. I'm actually predominantly an auditory learner, and I learn way better from a lecture, or I learn way better from listening to a podcast about something, and not even YouTube videos. I don't enjoy learning from YouTube videos. I just enjoy podcasts and lectures more than anything else in the world. And that little discovery led me to the insight of, well, maybe standardized education has just convinced us that we all basically learn in the same way. If you can't read, if you can't learn through reading, then you're a dumb person. If you can't learn through this PowerPoint presentation, then you're dumb. Without allowing us the liberty to explore different alternative ways of learning, without even like proposing something like, hey, you know, audiobooks might be really great for you. Which is also why today's tip might not work for you. You might not be an auditory learner. And this video's entire purpose is to encourage you to explore whatever technique that might work for you. And in fact, if you found something really interesting, leave it down in the comment section down below. I'd love to hear it. Bottom line, lean into your strength. This audiobook thing is working really well for me, so I'm gonna keep doing it. And you might learn better from like a YouTube lecture. You might learn better from even just talking to people about it. You might learn better better through reading, so in that case, don't do an audiobook. But here's where the second justification comes in for audiobooks, which is why you should put the audiobook on 1.5 speed when you're reading with it. So when I'm going through a long and very complicated book, the first instinct is to put it on a very low speed so you can, smell the scent of every word, so you can, read the same paragraph 20 times and, really bask in your philosophical imagination. That is a very terrible idea in my book if you are in this modern, distracted world that we live in. I don't know if you've noticed, but our brains right now are operating at such a high capacity or such a fast speed. I mean, the amount of information that's coming your way, it's incredible. And for me, it's a total wonder of the human brain that it is able to adapt to a stage where it can stay basically functional in this hyper-distracted world. Which means that the days of reading War and Peace while smelling the scent of each and every single little word while mulling over the same dialogue 20,000 times, our brains are no longer for that anymore. So in a sense, to focus very deliberately, you need to give your brain an incentive to focus, and putting the audiobook on 1.5 speed, even though it could be a very long and hard and complicated work, it would actually prevent you from drifting off into outer space. Because conventionally, audiobooks, when you play them back at a normal speed, it's designed for you to listen to when you're washing the dishes, taking your dog out for a shit, and then, I don't know, probably doing laundry. And the point is that entire learning process is passive, is not active. You're not actively concentrating on what you've read. You're not actively thinking about the thing that you've read because you're not really applying that much focus to the recording because the speed of the information intake is too damn slow. Your brain is not stimulated enough to follow the paragraphs. Whereas if you actually just sit down on your chair, set 20 minutes aside, put it on 1.5 speed and just follow along with like 1,000% concentration, you would learn a lot more in 20 minutes compared to you listening to Being in Time on your car on your way back home from work for 4 hours straight. Bottom line, reading an audiobook alongside a book at 1.5 speed, or even the experts among you can do it at 2x speed, is going to drastically cut down the amount of time that you spend on reading. And that amount of time is going to be so concentrated with focus and so concentrated with, deep work or deep reading that you're really getting 80% of progress with 20% of effort. Which leads us to justification number 3 about the highlighting stuff, why you shouldn't dwell on your highlights. Now, I've addressed this elsewhere, especially in my video, How to Read Analytically, which you should check out. It's actually a companion video for this video, And to summarize it, before you can truly understand the nitty-gritties of a chapter or the nitty-gritties of an author's contention, you need to get a general landscape of how the entire chapter functions or a general overview of the chapter. Otherwise, if you just focus on the nitty-gritties from the very get-go, it's going to be so difficult for you to piece together the entirety of the chapter or the overall structure of the chapter or where the author's getting at. And the strength of an audiobook is that it actually functions kind of like a cowboy hurrying the herd along. So the audiobook is hurrying you along to move past the nitty-gritty details, for you to move along the chapter so you can have a very brief impression of the whole chapter first when you're reading it together with the audiobook, because while pausing it takes some effort and you don't want to pause it all the time, so your only choice is to read through the whole chapter without ever pausing. You're always going to have time to review it later. You're always going to have time to read into it analytically. And yes, and again, I've addressed analytical reading in another video, so I'm not going to repeat myself here. And in your own time, review the highlights and generate summary notes and generate whatever your analyses are, and to sort of read a little deeper on your second reading without the audiobook. And when you put all that together, you're basically going to be a reading ninja. This technique allowed me to get through maybe 30 to 40 pages of something as dense as Martin Heidegger's Being in Time with a very adequate degree of understanding. And to be honest, it drastically slashed down the amount of time that I put towards reading on a daily basis, so I can free my time up to do other things like walking around, like drinking tea, like chatting with my friends. Nevertheless, that concludes this episode of bullshit-free, dairy-free reading advice. If you've enjoyed today's video, make sure to check out today's video sponsor, Squarespace, who made this entire thing possible. In short, Squarespace is an incredibly powerful online tool or online platform which allows you to build your dream blog or website or whatever you want to do. I personally use Squarespace for myself and for my website, which you can check out in the description down below, because God, some of the templates are so gorgeous. And if you're en route to starting a blog about your pet penguin or an online store that sells socks with sausage dogs printed on them. And in fact, I think I'm wearing a pair right now. Make sure to utilize Squarespace's feature, which allows you to create gated and member-only access content for you to generate revenue off of doing what you love. And if you want to communicate directly with your audience or your clients, you can also use Squarespace's feature of sending out email newsletters and keeping everyone in the loop through email communications. And alongside their powerful blogging tools and extensions, Squarespace is the perfect all-in-one platform for you to make your dreams come true. So if you're ready to build an online store or a landing page or just a place for you to summarize all of your social media presence, head to squarespace.com/rcwaldun to get a 10% off of your first purchase of a domain or your website when you're ready to launch. Thank you, Squarespace, for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you again with more. Take care and goodbye.